My name is Karen Shaw. I am a white female with long gray hair and glasses sitting in a beige room. I am a software developer with Northwestern University Libraries, and I'm here to talk about an Elixir library our team wrote called Authoritex, which we use in our new ingest application, Meadow. So what is Authoritex? In a nutshell, it's an Elixir version of the questioning authority gem. First and foremost, we want to give a big shout out to and thanks to QA. It's a great Ruby library that we currently use extensively in our Hierarchs application for searching and fetching authorities, both in our UI and in our batch ingest jobs. So Authoritex is a hex package. Hex packages are the Elixir equivalent of Ruby gems, and there's a practice of naming Elixir packages ending with EX, EX being Elixir's file extension. So why did we write this? Why didn't we just use QA in our new repository application? Mainly our new environment is Elixir, so we couldn't use QA directly in our app. We did talk about trying to run and use QA externally, either through an Elixir port, which is a way to run an external Elixir process and send messages to it, or we discussed maybe running it in Lambda. It seemed like an easy piece to abstract, and the amount of code to write it seemed doable in the small amount of time that we had. We wanted to have a little more control over caching, shape of the return data and errors, and also this would allow us to extend it with local Northwestern authorities directly within our application. We thought we could keep it very lightweight. We didn't want to maintain a separate server and cache potentially in a different language and technology stack. So I'm just going to briefly run through a few features and how we use it in our app. So to use this package in an Elixir application, you first need to include the Authoritex dependency in your app's mix file, which is the equivalent of the Ruby gem file. Then in your app's configuration files, you choose the authorities you want to use. There are about 17 default authorities. You can use as few or as many as you want. Out of the box, we support FAST, geonames, LOC, and Getty vocabs with several sub-authorities. You can also extend the default vocabularies with your own authorities. The Authoritex package defines the behavior of all implementing authorities. So to create a new authority in your app, create a module that adopts the behavior and then implements all of the required callback functions. This is very flexible. An authority can be anything you can wrap search and fetch functions around. Sources can be RDF or web endpoints or database calls. This graphic shows a couple examples of Authoritex's search API directly within Elixir's interactive shell IEX. The search API takes two parameters, the code name of the authority to search, which is one of the callback functions we just talked about that you need to implement, and a query string. The search returns a JSON object containing ID, label, and hint. I'll show you in how we use the hint in our app a couple slides later. An example of the fetch API takes an authority URI, and if the URI can be resolved, returns a JSON result with ID, label, hint, and qualified label. So how do we use Authoritex within our application Meadow? This is a big picture view. For those of you who might have seen my colleague Brendan's presentation on Monday, we have a distributed application with an Elixir backend, a React.js frontend, and GraphQL in the middle. Our Elixir app has Authoritex as a dependency. Caching is handled by our Elixir application, not by Authoritex. I'll touch on that in a little more detail in a bit. And then the search and fetch functionality is exposed to the front end through our GraphQL API. Quick peek at our GraphQL API and how we expose the fetch and search. Here, the fetch controlled term label is calling Authoritex fetch behind the scenes. This allows us to have better, more consistent error handling and information. And this is how the GraphQL API is then used within our user interface. What we're looking at is someone adding a contributor entry once the authority is selected and the type, and then you type in choose an item, auto suggest happens. This is powered by the search API of Authoritex through GraphQL. Note that this is how we are using the hint we saw earlier in the return data structure. In the list of items to choose, puppies is, for example, the label, and dog's infancy is the hint. This was something our users requested. Caching is handled by our ingest application, not by Authoritex itself. Terms are cached on first lookup, which is the Authoritex fetch call for the particular URI response. It's cached in two places, in ETS storage and in Postgres. ETS cache is an in-memory cache. It is short for Erlang term storage, and it's handled through that cachex hex package. It's similar to how we use Redis in our Hierarch stack. We have it set to a 6-hour expiration. So on the next lookup, the in-memory cache is checked first, then the database, and then only if it's not found in either, Authoritex is called and the result is cached in both places. Cache clearing, we have not done yet, but we've talked about it. We've had user feedback and planning meetings around local authority management, authority reconciliation, cache clearing, and we have a UI planned for that. That's the wireframe from one of those meetings on the left. And on the right, just showing we have a little bit of the back-end plumbing done to do the cleaning on the back end, like an expire function to clear the cache. So the library is written by Michael Klein, Brendan Quinn, and myself. We wrote the base modules and behaviors during pair programming sessions and then broke out to write the individual authorities. We'd love to hear from you with comments, questions, suggestions, and even criticisms. Here is our contact information and where you can find out more about Authoritex if you'd like to play around with it. Thank you very much for listening.